There is a $1 treatment made from a single natural oil that penetrates wood fiber at the cellular level and makes it completely waterproof for decades without a single reapplication. No deck stain, no polyurethane seal coat, no annual pressure washing and recoating ritual that eats your entire weekend every spring. Just a cheap, natural oil that soaks into the wood grain, polymerizes inside the cell walls, and hardens into a permanent moisture barrier that physically cannot wash out because it becomes part of the wood itself. The United States Forest Products Laboratory, the federal government's primary wood science research facility, has studied this oil's wood-preserving properties in published research spanning over 80 years. The Norwegian Institute of Wood Technology has tested this treatment under the most brutal marine climate conditions in the Northern Hemisphere and documented multi-decade performance. Researchers at Oregon State University's College of Forestry measured its penetration depth, moisture resistance, and cellular bonding and published results that no commercial deck stain has ever matched. This is not a weekend DIY experiment from someone's garage. Viking shipbuilders used this exact oil to waterproof the longships that crossed the North Atlantic Ocean over 1,000 years ago. Those ships survived years of continuous saltwater immersion, Arctic storms, and freezing temperatures. Japanese temple builders applied this same oil to wooden structures that have stood exposed to monsoon rains for over 600 years, without a single board being replaced. Entire medieval European cities waterproofed their timber-framed buildings with this oil, and some of those structures are still standing today, 500 years later, with the original treatment still performing. Then a $12 billion wood stain and sealant industry realized something catastrophic for their business model. They realized that a $1 oil that waterproofs would permanently eliminates the most profitable cycle in their entire product line. They did not stop recommending this oil because it failed any test. They did not replace it because chemistry produced something better. They buried it because a $1 treatment applied once in a lifetime cannot compete commercially with a $40 can of stain that must be reapplied every 2 to 3 years for the entire lifespan of your deck. And anything that destroys a repurchase cycle must be removed from public awareness. This is the story of the oldest wood waterproofing method on Earth, and the massive industry that reformulated, rebranded, and deliberately diluted this oil into a $40 product that fails on schedule so you will buy it. Again and again until you die or tear the deck down. If you are not subscribed yet, hit subscribe and the bell right now. What they buried, we dig up. Every single video. Travel back with me to approximately 2500 BC, the coastal boat yards of ancient Egypt along the banks of the Nile River and the shores of the Red Sea. Egyptian shipbuilders are constructing a vessel for Pharaoh Khufu, a ceremonial solar barge over 140 feet long, built entirely from Lebanese cedar planks. This ship must survive not just the river, but potentially the open Mediterranean, saltwater, sun exposure, constant moisture cycling between wet and dry, conditions that destroy untreated wood in a matter of months. The builders do not coat the wood with paint. They do not seal it with animal fat or wax. They saturate each plank with heated oil pressed from the seeds of the flax plant. Linseed oil. They heat the oil to reduce its viscosity, brush it liberally across every surface, and allow it to soak deep into the wood grain until the fibers can absorb no more. Over the following days, something remarkable happens. The oil does not simply dry on the surface. It undergoes a chemical transformation. Exposure to oxygen in the air triggers a process called oxidative polymerization. The individual oil molecules cross-link with one another, forming long polymer chains that harden into a solid, flexible, water-resistant matrix embedded within the wood cells themselves. The oil becomes part of the wood, not a coating on top of the wood. Part of its internal structure, a moisture barrier that cannot peel, cannot flake, cannot wash away, because it exists inside the cell walls, not on the surface. Khufu's solar barge was sealed in a pit beside the Great Pyramid of Giza when it was excavated in 1954. The cedar planks were still intact after 4,500 years, still showing traces of the linseed oil treatment that protected them across millennia, 4,500 years. The treatment still detectable, the wood still preserved, from an oil that costs less than a bottle of water today. Now travel north to Scandinavia, the 8th century AD, the age of the Vikings. Viking longships are arguably the most advanced wooden vessels in the ancient world, Clinker-built, from overlapping oak planks. These ships are designed to flex with ocean waves rather than resist them. They cross the open North Atlantic. They navigate Arctic ice fields. They beach on rocky shores and launch again with the tide. The punishment they endure is beyond anything a modern deck will ever experience. And every single plank on every single longship is treated with a mixture of pine tar and linseed oil. Pine tar, distilled from pine wood through slow pyrolysis, provides the antiseptic and antifungal properties that prevent rot. Linseed oil provides the deep, penetrating waterproof barrier that prevents moisture absorption. Together, this combination creates a preservation system so effective that Viking shipwrecks recovered from the ocean floor after 1,000 years of saltwater submersion still have intact, identifiable wood grain with measurable oil penetration. The Oseberg ship, discovered in a burial mound in Norway in 1904 and dated to approximately 820 AD, was preserved well enough to reconstruct in extraordinary detail. Wood analysis confirmed the presence of oil-based preservation treatments applied over 1,200 years ago. A treatment applied by Viking shipbuilders in 820 AD was still detectable in 1904, over a millennium of performance from an oil that grows in fields across the northern hemisphere, now crossed to medieval Japan, the 14th century. Japanese temple builders face a unique challenge. The climate across much of Japan combines extreme humidity, heavy monsoon rainfall, tropical intensity, sun exposure, and significant temperature swings between seasons. Wood, in this environment, rots quickly without protection. Japanese craftsmen develop a refined wood preservation technique using raw tung oil, a drying oil derived from the seeds of the tung tree native to East Asia. Tung oil shares the same oxidative polymerization chemistry as linseed oil, but cures to a harder, more water-resistant film due to its higher concentration of reactive double bonds in its molecular structure. Temple builders apply tung oil to exposed wooden structures in multiple thin coats, allowing each coat to penetrate and cure before applying the next. The result is a deep, hard, waterproof matrix that protects wood against decades of monsoon exposure. Japanese wooden temples, treated with tung oil in the 14th century, are still standing today. 600 years of monsoons, typhoons, earthquakes, and extreme humidity. Original wood, original treatment, still performing. Now look at medieval Europe. Across England, Germany, France, and the Netherlands, timber-framed buildings constructed between the 13th and 17th centuries were routinely treated, with boiled linseed oil as the primary waterproofing method. Half-timber-bird houses in towns like Strasbourg, Chester, Quedlinburg, and Colmar have survived 400 to 600 years with original oak timbers still in excellent structural condition. These are not climate-controlled museum pieces. These are buildings that have endured 6 centuries of rain, snow, freeze-thaw cycles, and UV exposure. And the wood has survived because linseed oil, applied once and refreshed occasionally across centuries, penetrates so deeply that moisture simply cannot reach the vulnerable interior fibers where rot begins. For over 4,500 documented years, one simple category of natural drying oil was the only wood waterproofing technology humanity needed: cheap, permanent, renewable, available from any flax or tung tree growing in any temperate field on Earth. Then, in 1866, Sherwin-Williams was founded in Cleveland, Ohio, and the paint and stain industry began its long, profitable campaign to convince the world that wood needs their product instead of the one that already worked for 4.5 millennia. Now stay with me, because the modern chemistry behind this $1 treatment is where the story becomes absolutely devastating to the stain industry. The oil is raw or boiled linseed oil, pressed from the seeds of the flax plant, Linum usitatissim, one of the oldest cultivated crops in human history. Here is what happens at the molecular level when linseed oil meets wood. Wood cells are composed primarily of cellulose and lignin, arranged in hollow tubular structures. These tubes are designed by nature to transport water and nutrients through the living tree. When the tree is cut and milled into lumber, those tubes become empty channels that absorb and release moisture from the environment. This constant moisture cycling is the primary cause of wood decay. Wet wood breeds fungal growth. Fungal enzymes break down cellulose. The wood softens, darkens, and eventually crumbles into rot. Every deck, fence, and exterior wood surface that fails does so because moisture entered the wood cells and fungi followed. Linseed oil has a molecular structure that gives it a unique and extraordinary ability. Its fatty acid chains contain multiple carbon-to-carbon double bonds, specifically in the alpha-linolenic acid that comprises roughly 50 to 60% of its composition. These double bonds are chemically reactive with atmospheric oxygen. When linseed oil is applied to wood, its low viscosity allows it to flow deep into the hollow cell structures through capillary action. The oil wicks into the wood exactly the way water would, following the natural grain pathways and saturating the cell walls from the inside. Then the oxygen in the air begins reacting with those double bonds. The oil molecules cross-link. One molecule bonds to the next, then thousands more, forming an interconnected polymer network that fills the cell interiors with a solid, flexible, hydrophobic matrix. This process takes 24 to 72 hours for initial curing and continues strengthening over weeks and months. The longer it cures, the harder and more water-resistant the polymer network becomes. The critical point is this: the oil does not sit on top of the wood surface. It is inside the cells, bonded at the molecular level to the cellulose walls. It cannot be washed off by rain. It cannot be pressure washed away. It cannot peel because there is no surface film to peel. The waterproofing barrier exists within the wood structure itself. This is fundamentally different from how commercial deck stains and sealants work. A typical commercial deck stain is designed to form a film on the wood surface. That film sits on top of the grain. It blocks moisture from the outside, but it also traps moisture that enters from the bottom or sides of the board underneath the film. Trapped moisture cannot escape, and trapped moisture is where rot begins. Within 2 to 3 years, the surface film begins to crack from UV degradation and thermal cycling. Moisture enters through the cracks. The film prevents it from leaving. The wood rots from within while still looking protected from the outside. This is why deck stains fail on a predictable schedule. Not because the chemistry is inadequate, because the fundamental approach, a surface film rather than cellular penetration, is structurally guaranteed to fail. The stain industry knows this. Their own product data sheets list reapplication intervals of 2 to 3 years for horizontal surfaces. They designed the product to fail on a schedule because scheduled failure generates scheduled repurchased. Linseed oil does not fail on a schedule because there is no surface film to crack. The waterproofing is inside the wood. UV radiation degrades the surface of the oil-treated wood cosmetically, but the moisture barrier within the cells remains functional for decades. A study published in the Journal of Coatings, Technology and Research tested linseed oil penetration depth in pine and oak samples and documented oil presence throughout the full cross-section of treated boards. The oil did not form a surface layer. It saturated the entire cellular structure of the wood. The Forest Products Laboratory in Madison, Wisconsin, the USDA's primary wood research facility, has published data confirming that oil-based wood treatments provide superior long-term moisture resistance compared to film-forming finishes because they work within the wood cell structure rather than on top of it. The Norwegian Institute of Wood Technology tested linseed oil-treated pine cladding under natural Nordic marine exposure conditions and documented functional waterproofing performance exceeding 20 years with zero reapplication. On properly saturated specimens, 20 years, zero maintenance. In a marine environment that destroys untreated wood in 3 to 5 years, from an oil that costs $1 per board foot to apply. Now here is where the math becomes truly devastating. 1 gallon of raw linseed oil costs between $10 and $20 at any hardware store. 1 gallon treats approximately 300 to 500 square feet of wood, depending on porosity and the number of coats applied. An average residential deck of 300 square feet requires approximately 1 gallon of oil applied in 2 to 3 coats over 2 to 3 days. Total material cost, $10 to $20. Total time, 3 afternoons of easy brushwork. That treatment penetrates into the cell structure and provides functional waterproofing for 10 to 20 years minimum. In many applications with proper initial saturation, significantly longer. Now compare that to the deck stain cycle. A premium deck stain costs $35 to $55 per gallon. 1 gallon covers approximately 200 to 400 square feet. An average deck requires $40 to $80 in stain every application. But before you can reapply stain, you must pressure wash the old stain off. Pressure washer, rental, or service, $50 to $200 per session. Then you must let the wood dry for 24 to 48 hours. Then apply 2 coats of stain over 2 days. This cycle repeats every 2 to 3 years for the entire lifespan of the deck. Over a typical 20-year deck lifespan, you will restain 7 to 10 times. Total cost of stain and maintenance over 20 years, 7 applications at $80 per application equals $560 in stain. 7 pressure washing sessions at $100 each equals $700, plus approximately 14 full weekends of labor at a value you can calculate yourself. $1,260 in direct costs, 14 lost weekends over 20 years. For a product designed to fail every 2 to 3 years, or $15 in linseed oil, applied once, 3 afternoons. 20 years of waterproof performance from a treatment that becomes part of the wood itself. $15 versus $1,260 for measurably superior wood protection, using an oil that has been proving itself for 4,500 years, while the stain industry has been selling you a product designed to fail for less than $1. So if linseed oil penetrates deeper, lasts longer, costs less, has been proven for millennia, and is documented by the USDA Forest Products Laboratory, why is it not the default treatment for every deck, fence, and exterior wood surface in the world? Why does every hardware store dedicate 40 feet of shelf space to deck stains and sealants that fail in 3 years, while linseed oil sits in a single small bottle on the bottom shelf with no signage and no marketing? Because the wood stain and sealant industry generates over $12 billion in annual global revenue. Companies like Sherwin-Williams, Behr Cabot, Thompson's WaterSeal, and Olympic dominate the market. Their entire product line is built around one business model: repeat purchase on a 2 to 3 year cycle for the entire lifespan of every wood surface on your property. A single homeowner with a deck, a fence, and a few exterior wood features represents $3,000 to $5,000 in lifetime stain and sealant purchases. Multiply that across 80 million homeowner properties in America alone, and you begin to understand the revenue at stake. A $1 oil treatment that lasts decades and never needs repurchase does not just reduce that revenue, it eliminates it entirely. You cannot patent linseed oil. It has been pressed from flax seeds for over 6,000 years. You cannot create a proprietary version of a molecule that nature invented. You cannot build a subscription model around a product that the customer applies once and forgets. So the industry did something far more calculated than simply ignoring linseed oil. They took linseed oil, diluted it with petroleum solvents, added pigments and UV stabilizers that actually reduce penetration depth, rebranded it as deck stain, and sold it back to you at 400% markup in a can designed to cover surface rather than penetrate structure. Many commercial deck stains contain linseed oil or modified linseed oil as their base ingredient. Read the ingredients list on the back of any oil-based deck stain can. You will frequently find linseed oil listed as a primary component, but it has been modified, thinned, and mixed with additives that prioritize surface appearance over deep cellular penetration. The industry took the oil that works permanently, reformulated it into a product that fails on schedule, and marketed the inferior version as the professional choice. They did not bury linseed oil because they found something better. They diluted it because the original was too good. If you've made it this far, you already understand more about wood preservation than 99% of homeowners who will. Spend this spring restaining a deck that should never have needed staining in the first place. Subscribe and share this video with someone who deserves to hear this before they waste another weekend and another $80 on a product designed to fail. Stay with me now because the most important part of this video is next. Now, I need to be completely honest with you here. Raw linseed oil has drawbacks that you need to understand before you apply it. It cures slowly. Raw linseed oil can take days to weeks to fully polymerize depending on temperature and humidity. During this extended curing period, the surface remains tacky and can collect dust and debris. Boiled linseed oil cures much faster, typically within 24 to 48 hours, because metallic drying agents have been added to accelerate polymerization. However, some boiled linseed oil products contain petroleum-based thinners that reduce penetration depth compared to the raw version. Linseed oil also does not provide UV color protection. Wood treated with clear linseed oil will gray naturally over time from UV exposure. This graying is cosmetic, not structural. The waterproofing barrier within the cells remains functional even as the surface color changes. If you want to maintain the original wood color, you will need to add a natural UV-resistant pigment or accept the silver gray patina that develops naturally. And linseed oil rags are a genuine fire hazard. The oxidative polymerization process generates heat. Bunched up rags soaked in linseed oil can spontaneously combust if not handled properly. Always spread used rags flat to dry outdoors or submerge them in water before disposal. This is not a minor safety note. This is critical. But here's what linseed oil does better than any commercial deck product on any shelf in any store. It penetrates to the cellular level rather than forming a surface film. It provides waterproofing from inside the wood structure where moisture damage actually begins. It does not crack, peel, or blister because there is no surface film to fail. It costs a fraction of commercial alternatives. It has been proven across 4,500 years of documented use, and it can be reapplied at any time without stripping, sanding, or pressure washing the previous treatment. No deck stain on earth can make those claims. Not one. Here's exactly what to do with this knowledge starting today. Step 1. Choose your oil. For maximum penetration and longest lifespan, buy raw linseed oil. Accept the longer curing time. The deeper penetration is worth the wait. A 1 gallon can cost $10 to $20 at any hardware store. For faster results with slightly reduced penetration, buy boiled linseed oil. It cures in 24 to 48 hours and is easier to work with. Same price range for the ultimate budget option, buy food-grade linseed oil, often sold as flaxseed oil in grocery stores. A 32-ounce bottle costs $3 to $5 and treats a significant area. Same oil, same chemistry, different label. Step 2. Prepare the wood. If working with a new deck or freshly sanded surface, no preparation is needed beyond ensuring the wood is clean and dry. If working with an existing stained deck, you must remove the old stain first. The old surface film will block oil penetration. Pressure wash, or use a deck stripper to remove the existing finish down to bare wood. Let the wood dry completely for 48 to 72 hours before applying oil. Step 3. Apply the first coat, using a brush, roller, or even a rag. Apply a liberal coat of linseed oil to the wood surface. Do not be stingy. The goal is saturation, not coverage. You want the wood to drink as much oil as it can absorb. Pay special attention to end grain. The cut ends of boards absorb moisture fastest and are the most common point of entry for rot. Saturate end grain until it stops absorbing. Let the first coat soak in for 30 to 60 minutes. Then wipe away any excess oil that has not been absorbed. Oil sitting on the surface will become sticky and attract dirt if not removed. Step 4. Wait 24 hours. Apply a second liberal coat using the same method. The wood will absorb less this time because the first coat has already filled much of the cell structure. Again, wipe away excess after 30 to 60 minutes. Step 5. Apply the third coat for maximum protection. For exterior surfaces exposed to direct weather, a third coat after another 24-hour wait provides maximum cellular saturation and the longest possible waterproof performance. 3 coats over 3 days, total hands-on time per coat, approximately 30 to 45 minutes for an average deck. The rest is waiting. Step 6. Allow full curing. Let the treated wood cure undisturbed for 1 to 2 weeks before placing furniture or subjecting it to heavy foot traffic. The polymer network is still cross-linking during this period and reaches maximum hardness over time. After curing, the wood is waterproofed from within. Rain will bead and run off the surface. Moisture will not penetrate the cell walls. Fungal growth cannot establish in the oil-saturated fibers. The deck will age gracefully, developing a silver gray patina if left natural, while the internal structure remains protected for a decade or more. Total material cost for a 300 square foot deck, $10 to $20 in oil, 3 afternoons of easy work, and a waterproof treatment that outlasts every can of stain on the market by a factor of 5 to 10. Let me state these numbers one final time so they burn permanently into your memory. A $1 per board foot linseed oil treatment penetrates into wood cells and provides waterproof protection for 10 to 20 years with zero reapplication. A $40 can of deck stain forms a surface film that cracks and fails in 2 to 3 years guaranteed. Over 20 years, the stain cycle costs $1,260 in materials and consumes 14 weekends of your life. Over 20 years, linseed oil costs $15 to $20 and takes 3 afternoons once. Viking longships survived the North Atlantic for decades on linseed oil and pine tar. Japanese temples have stood through 600 years of monsoons on tung oil. Medieval European buildings are still standing 500 years later on linseed oil treatments applied by craftsmen who understood that wood preservation happens inside the cell, not on top of the surface. And a $12 billion stain industry needs you to never figure out that the $40 can on their shelf contains a diluted version of the $1 oil that already works better by itself. This knowledge never disappeared from the planet. It was buried under 40 feet of branded stain cans at your hardware store. Buried under marketing campaigns that convinced 3 generations that wood needs a colorful film, applied every 2 years instead of a clear oil applied once. Buried under an industry that took the oil that works permanently, diluted it into a product that fails on schedule, and charged you 400% more for the inferior result. Egyptian shipbuilders knew 4,500 years ago. They saturated cedar planks with linseed oil, and the wood survived millennia inside a pyramid. Viking shipbuilders knew. They oiled their longships and crossed an ocean that destroys untreated wood in months. Japanese temple builders knew. They applied tung oil to wooden structures that have stood for 6 centuries of monsoon exposure. Medieval European builders knew. They oiled timber frames that still support inhabited buildings 500 years later. The USDA Forest Products Laboratory knows right now. They have published the data for over 80 years. The Norwegian Institute of Wood Technology confirmed 20-plus years of waterproof performance from linseed oil under marine exposure conditions. And the stain industry absolutely knows. They use linseed oil as a base ingredient in their own products. They just dilute it enough that it fails on their schedule, not yours. But right here, right now, watching this video, you just learned the same wood preservation science that survived Viking ocean crossings and Japanese monsoon seasons. And it costs less than a cup of coffee per board. Your great-grandparents oiled their porches, and they lasted a lifetime. Then, a $12 billion industry convinced your parents to stain theirs every 2 years instead. But today, sitting right here, you just broke that cycle. If this video opened something for you, subscribe and share it with every homeowner you know who has ever wasted a weekend restaining a deck. Every single share preserves what the stain industry spent decades trying to erase from your knowledge. The next video drops soon. What is inside weighs even heavier.